Um, Most of you know me, Dana Murch.
Dana Paul.
Yes.
And Bob's trying to join you too.
I'm in the process of researching and writing the definitive history and genealogy of the Murch family of Maine. And I have a little working group of very distant cousins who are helping me, two of whom are here today. Linda Murch Wigan from Benton, and the first cousin with last name Murch I've ever met in my life, Dave Murch from Freiburg. You're welcome. It's fun. In the course of this work, I found many mysteries, only some of which I've solved, several mistakes in published vital records, and a host of surprises, including several with unexpected connections to literary and political history, as well as to the Mayflower. So researching this family has certainly had its share of adventures, and I'm here to share some of those adventures. So to begin at the beginning. Assuming this works.
There we go.
So first generation Walter Murch was a fisherman from Devonshire, on the southwest coast of England. He settled in York, Maine by 1714. He and his wife Deborah had 4 children, all of whom married. To the best of my knowledge, everyone born in Maine with the name Murch is descended from immigrants Walter and Deborah. As an aside, I've identified all of the descendants through 5 generations. I think it's 670 people, without exception. Every single one of them was born in the state of Maine. So we got some roots, as we say. Shortly after 1732, the entire extended Murch family moved from York to Biddeford. In 1757, the grandson of immigrant Walter, also named Walter, bought land in Gorham and moved there with his brother, John. This bit of history will all become clear why I'm doing this. Gorham was originally settled as Narragansett No. 7, one of 7 townships created by the Massachusetts Bay Colony to provide land grants to the soldiers or the heirs of soldiers who fought in the 1675 King Philip's War, named after the Wawenoc sachem Metacom, who was called King Philip by the English. As a result, many of the early settlers of Gorham came from Massachusetts and especially from Cape Cod. And this is on the slide is a plan of the Gorham town lots. In 1758, this 3rd generation Walter Murch married Jerusha Brown, a native of Eastham, Mass on Cape Cod, moved to Gorham with her parents in the early 1750s. The first surprise was, these are my ancestors. Jerusha Brown was a descendant of Mayflower passengers Stephen Hopkins and his daughter Constance, who were among the pilgrims who founded Plymouth Colony in 1620. Plymouth was the 2nd permanent settlement in North America, the first being Jamestown, and it turns out that Stephen Hopkins was also a resident of Jamestown for a time, but that's another story. Walter and Jerusha had 10 children, born at Gorham between 1760 and 1780. Second surprise, this means that Jerusha was likely pregnant or nursing for at least 22 consecutive years.
She's now a saint.
She's now a saint. The children of Walter and Jerusha were listed in the published history of Gorham, Maine. It's compiled by the McClellan family and published in 1903. Here's my These are the children, and I'm going to focus on 2 of them. Sarah, who married William Irish, and Susanna, who married Joshua Newcomb. And lucky for me, Walter was listed in the 1790 census, which was the first census taken in the United States. The Maine Genealogical Society, as many of you know, is publishing books with sketches of those families. In the census, only the head of household was named. So you really have to do some digging to identify the wives and the children and then who they married. And we see here again, Sarah married William Irish. Susanna married Joshua Newcomb. So as part of my research early on, I wanted to find out what other people had researched about the Maine family. It's always good to piggyback on what someone else has done and not duplicate things. So I found records left by two 20th century researchers, both of whom were Murch descendants. Lucy Ellen Eyre was born in Freedom in 1868, the daughter of Peter Eyre and Hattie Kelly Murch. Great name. She was a seventh generation Murch descendant. She taught school for several years, then went to college, graduated in 1905, presumably with a certificate in nursing, 1926 from Radcliffe with a baccalaureate degree, 1932 from Boston University with a master's degree. By her own admission, she was by profession a genealogist and well educated for her time, coming from rural Maine. That is Lucy Ellen Eyre's handwritten manuscript of the Murch family and all of her other ancestors, which is in the collections of the Maine Historical Society in Portland. All nicely handwritten, never published. Shown here is the first page of her write-up of Walter and Jerusha. And then their kids, Sarah married William Irish, Susanna married Josiah Newcomb. The second researcher has a name you may know, Catherine Woodworth Trickey, born at Bangor in 1910, ninth generation Murch descendant. Received a BA in education from the University of Maine in 1932, was an elementary and high school teacher in the Bangor area, and was a staff sergeant in the U.S. Army during World War II. After the war, she received a master's degree in library science from Columbia University, was for many years the head of library and media services in Swampscott, Mass. After retirement, moved to Camden, became the chair of the Cemetery Inscription Project for the Maine Old Cemetery Association. That's where you may know her name because you'll see it plastered all over those huge gray volumes in the libraries. And she was a longtime archivist for the Camden Historical Society. Her notes are in the collection of the Camden Historical Society. This is what's called the group sheet, for those of you who don't do genealogy, where you list the parents and then kids who they married. There's Sarah marrying William Irish. If I can find her here. Susanna's there somewhere. I'm not seeing her right now. So she had the same marriages. Sarah Murch to William Irish, and Susanna Murch and Joshua Newcomb. Well, so far so good, except that I'm sitting there with the published vital records of Gorham, and I'm finding children born to Murch women with the names Sarah and Susanna that I don't recognize. I don't know of any other Sarah and Susanna. So I bite the bullet and go to Family Search, where there's the microfilm of the Gorham Town records unindexed, and you just start slogging through. And that's what I find. There's Walter and Jerusha, Sarah, and Susanna. With a bunch of scribbles at the bottom, which I will highlight. William Murch, an illegitimate child whose reputed father is William Smith of Buxton, was born of Susanna Murch in Gorham, 13th day of January, 1784. Sarah was 17 years old. John Davis, an illegitimate child. Whose reputed father is John Davis, the son of Josiah Davis, was born of Sarah Murch at Gorham, January 8, 1780. She was 18 years old. This establishes that they are the children, Sarah and Susanna, of William and Walter and Jerusha Brown. Now I know for a fact that Catherine Trickey had the same microfilm I did because it's in her notes. I know for a fact that the McCullens, who wrote the history of Gorham, were sitting there with the town records. They had that exact same sheet. They just ignored the fact that these women had children born out of wedlock. My guess is it offended their moral or religious sensibilities, or maybe both. But the moral of this story is you can't necessarily trust what people put in their written records. So then there were more surprises. John Davis, who was the paramour of Sarah Murch, was a descendant of Mayflower passengers John Tilley, Jonas Rogers Tilley, Elizabeth Tilley, and John Howland. William Irish, who was Sarah's husband, was the son of Mary Gorham Finney, reportedly the first white child born in Gorham, and a descendant of Mayflower passengers Tom Rogers and his son Joseph. Joshua Newcomb, another Mayflower descendant. He married Susanna. After his death, Susanna married a widower, Samuel Linnell, also from Cape Cod. He was a Revolutionary War veteran pensioner and a descendant of Mayflower passengers Thomas and Joseph Rogers. And someone's phone is making a sound.
Oh, yes.
Somebody's phone was not even there.
So then there were more surprises. Neither Lucy Ellen Eyre nor Catherine Woodworth Trickey, who were both Murch descendants, ever married or are known to have any biological children. Now, this book may be familiar to some of you. If you have any Maine ancestry prior to 1700, this is the book to go to. Have it because I use it so much, I bought a copy. There aren't any Murches there because the people who wrote that couldn't figure out how to link the Murches together. And there's just the one Murch who came, who was born prior to 1700. Sybil Davis did most of the footwork for this book. Charles Thornton Libby was a well-known genealogist who wrote the definitive Libby genealogy, which people still use today. Walter Goodwin Davis was born in Portland and was one of the preeminent genealogists of his generation, wrote a ton of books that people still use and refer to. None of these three people are known to have biological children.
They had a lot of free time.
I have no biological children. Does anyone know of people who do genealogy who don't have biological children?
My sister. The only one.
I mean, I see a trend here. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about why that would be the case. Why is it that?
I bet it's because you have more time on your hands.
Yeah. So more time on our hands. Money, okay. My excuse is it's a way for me personally to connect with the family when that family is not going on for me. I can at least connect with the past. Yes.
What was the date of the publication of this?
It was published serially in the early 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, and then has been published many times since. And there's a copy upstairs.
Yes.
So now I want to talk about interfamily marriages. You're probably familiar with situations where sisters of one family married brothers in another family. Well, cousins also married, especially in rural areas where the choices in marriage were often limited. Unlike French Catholics, English Protestants put no limitations on the marriage of cousins. If you're a Catholic, you had to get special dispensation to marry a cousin that was any closer than third. And first and seconds were verboten. And then you also have cases where widows or widowers would marry the brother or sister of the deceased spouse. I had no idea how many Murches married Murches. And mind you, I'm only partway through writing the 5th generation. So I've got a lot of generations to go. These are the marriages of first cousins in the 3rd generation, 4th generation, and 5th generation. And notice that some of them they don't even have a Murch last name. So they're Murch descendants. And I never would have found them if I didn't research the entire family, which is the other point to make. These people were married between the mid-1700s and the mid-1800s. And these are marriages of a Murch family member to a non-Murch family member who was a first cousin. So, John Alexander Cook Mercer, his mother was Eliza Day's mother's sister by godfather. And marriages of second cousins. Now, I don't know about you. I don't even know a second cousin, let alone be married to one. How many people know second cousins? No. Well,
What is the second cousin?
A lot.
What is the second cousin?
So, you share grandparents. And in some of these cases, these people didn't even live in the same town. And we were talking places like Biddeford, Standish, Gorham, Buxton. It might have been next door. They were different towns. What I find fascinating is you're not going to marry a second cousin unless your two families know each other. And you had to know we're related. It goes without saying. So I just find it fascinating that these families were as close as they apparently were. That's a total of 14 marriages of first or second cousins. And I haven't finished the 5th generations. Does it explain anything? Here's what many people have seen is marriages of siblings. So sets of sisters or a brother and sister in one family marrying, sets of brothers or a brother and sister in another family. And this is through several generations. And marriages of in-laws. So Mary married Jonathan Davis. She died, and then Jonathan Davis married Sarah, her sister. And that happened routinely. And again, these families knew each other. Now, these are my two favorites. 3rd generation William Murch of Biddeford married Thankful Harding Murch, the widow of William's first cousin, who was also named William, who lived in Gorham. And his first wife was named Thankful.
Sounds like my other brother did.
And there's Matthias Murch Jr., who married Lydia Shackford. Her sister, Hannah, married Matthias Jr.'s father as his second wife, making Hannah both Matthias Jr.'s sister-in-law as well as his stepmother.
There's a song about that.
Not from Maine.
So now there's a true mystery that because there were mistakes in the vital records, took a long time to figure out. So this is the death record from Gorham of Eleanor Blake, who died in May of 1874 at the age of 77. Calculate from her age at death that she was born about July of 1797. This is early. Her parents are listed as Jonathan Murch and Mary, unknown name. This would be great, except I didn't know anybody named Jonathan Murch. And if this Eleanor was born a Murch, she must have been married to a Blake at some point. But I didn't have any record of an Eleanor Murch marrying anyone named Blake. So I went to the microfilm of the Gorham Town records, and I found the 1913 marriage intentions of Samuel Lombard of Gorham and Eleanor Murch of Buxton. Okay, well, assuming that this is the same Eleanor, she was born in Buxton, which narrows down who her parents could have been. According to the history of Gorham, this Samuel Lombard died at sea in 1816, so that was shortly after their marriage. Then I found an 1824 marriage of George Blake of Gorham and Eleanor Lombard of Buxton. Well, this sounds good. Several family trees on Ancestry showed Eleanor Blake to be the daughter of Daniel and Mary Murch of Buxton. So I searched the microfilm of the Buxton Town records. This is what I found. If anyone who's figured this out, please hold your thoughts so that we don't spoil the surprise for everybody. There's no Eleanor there. Well, I stared at this a little while and I saw Nabby. Well, Nabby must be a nickname. People would often use nicknames in census records and birth records that caused no end of confusion. So I went to the Bible for old nicknames on Family Search, where it lists the nickname and the formal name. Nabby is Abigail. And Nellie is Eleanor. There's Nabby, and there's Nellie. So this is Eleanor Murch, who married a Blake Lombard, who married a Blake. And her death record was wrong in naming her parents, and wrong in naming her age at death. The moral of that story is you can depend on death records for two things: where someone died and when they died. You can't necessarily depend on them for anything else. It's a hard lesson to learn. So now we're going to talk about the Revolutionary War. In April of 1775, 38-year-old Ebenezer Murch with a private and Captain Hart Williams company of Gorham militia. They began to march to Boston in response to the alarm that was raised after the battles of Lexington and Concord. They reached the Maine border, but were ordered to return to Falmouth, which was Portland, to protect the coastal towns in York and Cumberland County. We'll move on then to Boston. This is an old map of Boston. This is Charlestown. All of that bay has been filled in. The colonial militia soon began the siege of Boston, and in July of 1775, newly commissioned Commander-in-Chief General George Washington arrived at Cambridge to assume his post. In February of 1776, the following winter, Ebenezer Murch was commissioned as a second lieutenant in a company of militia that marched to Boston and was stationed at Winter Hill. Right there. for 2 months. The British, who were surrounded, soon evacuated Boston for New York. And the army of militia, which was more mob than anything, occupied Boston. General Washington wrote of his army, "They were indeed at first an army of undisciplined husbandmen, but it is, under God, to their bravery and attention to duty, but I am indebted for that success which has procured me the only regard I wish to receive the effect and esteem of my countrymen." So there was a march with George Washington at the siege of Boston in 1776. The following year, the Continental Congress authorized the creation of a number of regular army regiments as opposed to militia. And people signed on for 3-year enlistments. At the time, the British were pursuing a strategy that called for splitting the colonies in two along the Hudson River. And I apologize for this being a line chart, but it showed me everything I wanted. So one army, commanded by British General John Burgoyne, was moving south from Quebec down Lake Champlain to the Hudson River. Burgoyne had earlier described the colonial forces surrounding Boston as, quote, "a rabble in arms, flushed with success and insolence," unquote. The second British army was commanded by Henry Clinton, who was moving up the Hudson River from New York. The Continental Army moved to meet Burgoyne's army before the two British armies could meet. And that colonial army included the 12th Massachusetts Regiment. It fought 2 decisive battles near Saratoga in New York, near Albany. The first was at Freeman's Farm. This is a battle plan. And the second was at Venus Heights. This was September and October of 1777. The battles of Saratoga resulted in the defeat of the British and the surrender of Burgoyne's army, and is seen by most historians as a turning point in the war. On the screen is the famous 1821 painting by artist John Trumbull entitled "Surrender of General Burgoyne," which is on display in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. If you're interested in more information, I recommend Maine author Kenneth Roberts' historical novel, Rattle at Arms, which is about the trials and travails of the Northern Army in the battles with General Burgoyne. This all is leading somewhere, Justin. The 12th Massachusetts Regiment, which participated in the battles of Saratoga, then marched south and joined the army of George Washington in winter quarters at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Shown is a reproduction of the soldiers' huts at Valley Forge National Historic Park, which I highly recommend you go. We've been there. And as I say, all this has a reason. Believe it or not, there is a published book that includes a muster roll of all Maine men at Valley Forge, published in 1910 by the Maine Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. Colonel Samuel Brewer's 12th Massachusetts Regiment, Captain Silas Burbank's company, Dana Murch. Captain Daniel Merrill's company, Matthias Murch. So there were 2 marches with George Washington at Valley Forge. Now comes a true mystery. This is the gravestone at Locust Grove Cemetery in Hamden. It reads, W.M. for William Murch, Fields, apostrophe, N.Y., presumably for New York, Mill, Rev. War. No dates. There's no evidence in the sexton's record as to whether anyone is buried with this stone. I have a cousin, Joel Fuller, who douses and finds things like gravestones and pipes, and it works, believe me. He says there in fact is a body there. We don't know whose it is. Presume it's William. But now comes the mystery. I only know of one William Murch who served in the Revolutionary War. He was born in Gorham in 1763, served 3 short enlistments from Gorham between 1779 and 1781. He married at Gorham in 1782. His wife soon died, and then moved to Hamden, where he married his second wife in 1787. Revolutionary War pension, was living with the family of his son Newell in the 1840 census. Reportedly died in 1844, but no one knows where he's buried.
So he was only 16 when he was in the army.
Well, that would seem unlikely. Anyone have any thoughts about what this might mean? Fields and why? I mean, this is clearly military Revolutionary War, but I Googled and I couldn't find any place called Fields, New York.
Looks like an apostrophe.
It looked like an apostrophe, yeah. So it wasn't at all clear this was the same William Murch from Hamden, who was serving in Gorham and was only, as Lyndon says, only 16 when the war started. So I went to Fold 3, which is a subscription military records site. And look what I found. Fields Regiment, Dutchess County, William Murch, on a list of men called into service by Colonel John Field for scouring the woods and to apprehend dangerous persons under the command of Lieutenant Azor Barnum, dated Poughkeepsie, May 1777. Well, it certainly sounds like Fields, New York to me. Now, there are Murch families in Massachusetts and New York. I have no idea how they're connected to the Maine family, if at all. There were a lot of Murches in Devonshire back in the day. And I'm sure there were other Murch immigrants to the US. The fact that there's a stone for this person in Hamden suggests there's some connection, that they at least knew each other. Well, then came another surprise. Earlier this year, Jackie Murch, who lives in Hamden, was cleaning stones in the Hamden Cemetery. Whoops. And you can see that that stone for William Murch, the Revolutionary War soldiers, at quite an angle. Jackie started digging in front of it to try to straighten it. It wouldn't straighten because it's just buried too deep. But she found something. Now on the back of this, there's a line. So clearly there was a rod and a couple of brackets. And this 1763 would be the Murch, William Murch, who was born in Gorham and who then served in the Revolutionary War there and moved to Hamden. So he couldn't possibly be the William Murch who served in Poughkeepsie in 1777 because he'd be 14 years old at that point. And that just wasn't the wrong place, not the right age. So I'm still trying to figure out who that William Murch is, and I'm probably going to have to contract with a researcher in Dutchess County, New York, to see if they can find out anything about a Murch family there. But in the meantime, we have the mystery of this plaque, which got solved when Jackie Murch went to another cemetery in Hamden and found this. She can't quite read, but it says S.A.R. Sons of the American Revolution. And if you can get rid of that.
Yeah.
It's hard to see, but that plaque looks exactly like it. Okay. So why won't this work?
Did it click on the screen? He's there.
That plaque same design, same size. So my best guess is because there's only one William Murch with a stone in Locust Grove Cemetery, because it's well known that there was a William Murch who served in the Revolutionary War. The Sons of the American Revolution simply put this marker at his grave. The rod rotted or the plaque fell off and it got buried after a while under the ground. Yes.
One thing to note, and having done a lot of Revolutionary War, there were a lot of 14 to 16-year-olds serving in those units. There were a lot.
It would seem
Like because under militia law, by the time they were 15, they could serve in a gun.
yeah. It would seem unlikely that a 14-year-old would be assigned to go scour the woods for unsavory characters, that's all. He wasn't a drummer.
No. They could carry a weapon, but they could carry a weapon. Yeah.
Okay.
Dana, you're doing a field trip to New York.
Yeah.
We already know this.
Did you hear that, Meredith?
All expenses paid.
So now there's a surprise wrapped in a mystery that I never expected. This is a photograph taken in 1992 of a granite block house on Calderwood Neck, which is on near the northern tip of Vinyl Haven Island. It's the only standing granite dwelling house on Vinyl Haven. It was built by a mason at a time when the granite quarries on the island were just beginning to develop national markets. In later years, Vinyl Haven granite would be used in the construction of many public and private structures, including the New York, Brooklyn Bridge, and the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and in Washington, D.C., the Washington Monument. The house and its nearby barn, which is shown here, exemplify conditions of subsistence farming on Maine islands in the 19th century. The homestead included an apple orchard and small plots of vegetable gardens scattered over the property wherever enough soil could be found. This house was built in 1850 by William Murch, who was a mason, and his son, Isaac. Isaac was the first of a long line of Murch family fishermen to occupy the house. Isaac would later serve as a lieutenant in the 28th Maine Infantry during the Civil War, was killed in action at Fort Donelson, Louisiana in 1863, and left no descendants. In 1993, the Murch family house and the barn were placed on the National Register of Historic Places by virtue of its architectural significance. According to the National Register registration form, William Murch's origins were unknown. The house still stands today and is used as a seasonal residence. That is the gravestone of Mason William Murch and his first wife. As luck would have it, William served for a year in the U.S. infantry during the War of 1812, and later his widow requested a pension. And he actually requested bounty land. In these applications, which I got from the National Archives, are affidavits by William that establish that he was born in Gorham in 1790, which would be absolutely great. Got lots of Murches in Gorham. I just have no clue who his parents are. I can tell you all the parents, I can tell you the kids, some of them already had Williams, and I can't find a place to fit another kid. So I know he's from this family. I just can't tell you what his ancestry is. And just when I thought I had this presentation complete, last month, the property of Vinyl Haven went on the market. The property is the 24-acre peninsula on Calderwood Neck with nearly a half-mile of ocean frontage. On the market for the first time in 175 years. Property includes the historic 1,100 square feet granite block Murch family house and the adjacent barn,
Are we going on a field trip?
as well as a shingled camp near the main house and a bungalow camp near the eastern tip of the peninsula.
So did you go check it out?
We'll get there. Currently, there is no electric service to go to this property, and there is no drilled well. The asking price is $2 million.
That's all.
So for $2 million plus the 2% buyer's agency fee and closing costs, you too can own a unique piece of Maine Murch family history, and can live in mid-19th century splendor and simplicity. And there were, I think I counted 5 generations of Murches who lived there, which is remarkable. And they were, by and large, lobster fishermen.
Better sell some more books.
And I've saved the best for last.
Wait, you left this thing. Are you gonna buy it?
I'm happy, I did want to contribute, I'm happy that we can,
Go fund it.
Go find me.
we can do shares, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I suspect strongly, given that price, given the size of the parcel, that someone with a whole lot of money is gonna buy it and build 2 or 3 mega mansions there, as long as they can, you know,
That's
drill a well and blast the granite so they get enough drinking water. That's the biggest problem, I think, on
But
island.
they can't mess with the house, because it's on the National Register.
Yeah, they
That
can't.
doesn't protect it. It's just listed. Yeah, as are many houses in Belfast.
It's easy to get around.
You know, it's not, I mean, it could lose its character if the exterior is changed, but lots of places go on the register and then either fall down or burn down or replaced, so. Henry David Thoreau, a mid-19th century author and transcendentalist, who famously lived in a cabin on Walden Pond in Massachusetts, where he sought to simplify life and encounter its essence. Thoreau loved wilderness, and he made 3 trips to the Maine North Woods during his lifetime. His travels were serialized and then after his death were published in a volume called The Maine Woods. The first of his trips occurred in 1846. He journeyed from Concord, Massachusetts to Bangor by train and steamboat, then upstream along the Penobscot River by horse-drawn buggy and ferries to Wawenoc, then by foot to the confluence of the East Branch and West Branch of the Penobscot, up the West Branch to Shad Pond, then got in a bateau, which is a flat-bottomed riverboat that has very shallow draft. Went by bateau and various portages through the ponds and deadwaters and rapids up the West Branch to above Aball Falls, the last half mile of which carried us to the Wawenoc deadwater, so called from the stream of the same name, signifying running between mountains, an important tributary which comes in a mile above. Here we decided to camp at the mouth of Murch Brook and Abel-Jack-Nagasic mountain streams, broad off from Katahdin, about a dozen miles from its summit. Abel-Jack-Nagasic stream is Abel stream. Murch's Brook is Katahdin stream. That's where Thoreau camped overnight. Well, this would be great. Make a literary reference to Murch. Except I don't have a Murch within 100 miles of Katahdin. All the experts I consulted with said, well, Thoreau probably got that name from one of his guides, which means by 1846, it was a well enough established name that the guides were using. 1846, I mean, that's early for the Murch family, which started out in southern Maine. Well, luckily, I have a Murch cousin who's an avid hiker and a historian who solved the mystery. This is the 1850 census for Township 7, Range 12, Penobscot County, on the east shore of Chamberlain Lake, at the headwaters of the Allagash River. And, you go a couple of miles south and you're in the West Branch. Only 5 men are recorded in this township. They were living at Chamberlain Farm, which was established in 1846 as a supply depot for logging operations. The last name, Dean Murch, Hunter. As Thoreau noted, when he went up the West Branch in 1846, the only non-native people then living above the confluence of the East and West branches were loggers, farmers who supplied food to the loggers, and hunters who supplied meat to the farmers and the people who ran logging houses. This is the 1860 census. Dean Murch, now age 60, recorded in the household of William Hunt. This was on the East Branch. William Hunt was the son of another William Hunt from Gorham, which is where a lot of Murches came from. In 1830, this William Hunt was one of 4 Gorham men who purchased this township and established a Hunt farm, which provided supplies to the loggers. And that is Hunt Farm on the East Branch. Then came a stroke of absolute war. So 1850, I got the Dean Murch on the West Branch. 1860, the same Dean Murch on the East Branch. 1861, a team from the state geologist's office ascended the East Branch to perform a survey. In their follow-up report, which is published in the 1882 History of Penobscot County, they reported meeting with Dean Murch at Hunt Farm, we know he was there, who stated that, quote, some 30 years before, when out hunting, unquote, he had seen an island in the lake north of Hunt Farm. So Dean Murch was in the area by 1830. And then the final piece of evidence. This is again from the microfilm of the Gorham Town records. The children of George and Hannah Murch, Doan, Dean, born 1800. His dates fit. He was 50 years old in 1850, 60 years old in 1860. And as genealogists like to say, spelling is optional. So there's no other person who this could be from Gorham. Probably went to the Hunt Farm with the Hunts from Gorham, the East Branch, and was hunting all over. Worked at both the Hunt Farm and the Chamberlain. Thoreau was completely enthralled with the West Branch and the Maine woods. This is a quote from his book. Who shall, it should be shall, describe the inexpressible tenderness and immortal life of the grim forest, where nature, though it be midwinter, is ever in her spring. What a place to live, what a place to die, and be buried in. Dean Murch died somewhere, probably on the East Branch, sometime after 1861, and is buried somewhere in the Great Maine Woods. Questions, comments? Yes, Heather.
What kind of a name is Jerusha? I mean, I know there's a lot of weird names back then, but.
I think it's biblical, isn't it?
Is it? Is it?
The Bible.
Yeah, I thought I knew my Bible. You're a Baptist. Come on. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah.
I think it was Catherine something tricky, but I'm wondering how you knew about her notes that never got published that were down at the Portland Historical Society.
Well, Lucille and Ayers are in Portland. Yeah, that's the Maine Historical Society, and I just Googled went onto their library, typed in Murch, saw what popped up. Catherine Tricky's papers are in Hamden, and I was there doing research and said, well, maybe she's got stuff on the Murches, and she did, and they've got her papers. Yeah,
How many living Murches are there right now?
no idea.
How many are in this room?
Well, I was thinking if you divide that number by 2 million.
Does Peggy have children?
Yes, my twins, I have a twin sister,
Yeah.
and she has 3 boys. And 2 of them have children.
Good.
So, yes, the line is carrying on.
Yeah,
Without the name Murch.
and you talked about knowing second cousins, and my home room at Lawrence, there was Brenda, Dana, me, and Janet was the only one that was a first cousin, the other ones were second cousins. There were a lot of us at Lawrence. I don't know how many years they went, but they always had a secret in every class.
Including me.
Then you go the one step further, this is Bobby, my 5th cousin, we're married now 48 years.
But our children are normal.
Well,
Well, Meredith and I are cousins, but we don't talk about it. Very distant.
Great.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Dana.